Hey everybody, it's Fox. Welcome back to my channel, and for today's video I thought it would be a little bit interesting to talk about something that a lot of us cosplayers and 3D printers are all too familiar with, and that is dealing with our failures. Whenever I say failures, I am talking both 3D printing failures as well as just general hobby failures. And in this particular video, I'm going to be going through all of the trials and tribulations that I personally have been having with this Mandalorian helmet that I'm making for my husband. If you've been here since the beginning of 2021, you know that I started off the year with, actually it's one of my most popular videos right now, in which I showed you all how to 3D print a helmet all in one piece, and for that particular helmet I was using a Mandalorian helmet. And if you've noticed, there have been absolutely no other tutorial videos for that particular helmet, and there's a good reason for that. There were a lot of failures along the way. I think it's important to talk through our failures. I think it's important to just kind of, be transparent about the fact that this hobby is not always easy, and this hobby always has failures along the way, and we're going to learn from those. And even if the failure means that you have to take a 5-month break from a costume, that is totally normal and totally fine. So if you're interested in any of that stuff that I have to say, then just keep on watching. So to start off this 9-month journey of me getting to this point, I have to start off with the very first Mandalorian helmet that I printed, and that is the one that I showcased in that January 6th video on how to print your helmets in one piece. It currently looks like this, and you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, you got all the way to the painting stage and then realized that it wasn't exactly what you wanted. And that is exactly right. And this is where we're going to talk about my first point, which is the sunk cost fallacy. It's essentially the idea that the more time that you put into a project, then the more invested you feel in it, and the more that you feel like you have to see that project through, even if it's not turning out the way that you want. So to kind of put you back into perspective, after that January 6th video, I had began putting Mando on this helmet and basically smoothing it up. I want to say that this whole helmet actually took me about a month to get completely smooth, and this was back before I was doing my UV resin method. I put on at least 5 layers of Mando onto this thing, and there were so many passes of just filler primer and then wet sanding to get it to a really glossy finish. And unfortunately, I think in my frustration of it just taking longer than I thought it would, I deleted all of the footage. I think I only have a couple snippets from previous videos that I put out that I'll hopefully put on the screen for you guys. Needless to say, it took me about a month to get this helmet completely smooth and ready for paint. And that's where the problems kind of started. I was essentially just I wanted to get this helmet done, and I felt like it was taking me too long to get this helmet done from January, that I was basically doing whatever I could. And whenever I was doing whatever I could, I was making a lot of mistakes. What I ended up doing was I ended up painting the helmet completely flat black and then putting a gloss clear coat over top of that. Usually a glossy black coat of paint underneath it will bring out the best in the chrome paint that you're going to put on top of it. I did all of that, and then when it came time for me to put on the Montana Gold Silver Chrome paint, I messed up a lot. There are a lot of runs in this paint job. There are just a lot of, I just did a very shoddy job of painting it. And back a couple months ago, I was determined to get this helmet and actually all of his armor painted up with rattle cans. And the problem with painting silver chrome with rattle cans is that there's not a lot of paints that can really go over top of it. In fact, I don't think that there's a spray can that you can put over top of it that will not dull your chrome. And I, for whatever reason, had it in my mind that I really wanted to get all of this armor painted with just rattle cans. Don't get me wrong, you can totally paint your Mando in rattle cans of chrome paint. The problem comes whenever you're trying to actually seal in that chrome overcoat. And I just couldn't find a reliable way to do that that wouldn't dull the chrome. And as you can kind of see here, I was really kind of just experimenting, and this actually has a Montana Gold varnish over top of it, and it just completely dulled it. It looks really flat now, and I just am not happy with it. And the other thing, and this was totally my fault because I wasn't paying attention to scaling, whenever my husband actually put this helmet on, it was so close to his nose that his nose would have been smashed up against the visor whenever I installed it. I was very frustrated with myself because I preach a lot of these things on my channel. Make sure you do your test prints and that you make sure you have your scaling all correct before you go, all the way in with a whole helmet. I was just feeling very discouraged with the build. So what I essentially did after that was in, I want to say mid-March to early April, I essentially told myself I'm going to take a break from the Mandalorian build, and the same thing went with Bo-Katan, and I just put them away until I felt the pull to revisit them. I have relegated this helmet over here to basically a paint tester now, so it's not going completely unused. However, I did put a lot of time and effort into that helmet, and I just needed to take a break from it. That's essentially what led to the whole lull of Bo-Katan and Mandalorian content for a couple months, because I was just so frustrated with myself, and I had put so much time into it that I just didn't want to continue on and mess up further things. So I worked on other stuff. I worked on my Attack on Titan cosplay. I also worked on a Sylvie cosplay in August. And then after Dragon Con, I had seen a lot of Mandalorian cosplays and I was feeling a lot more inspired to get back at it, as well as the fact that we've got C2E2 coming in just under 2 months. And now I have an actual concrete date of when we want to wear these costumes. So I went back to the drawing board and I basically scaled up my husband's helmet to 112%, which was a little bit too big, but that's not the actual reason for the failure. Let me show you the second failure that I had, and this was at the last week of September, so it had been a couple months until I picked everything back up. Here it is! This helmet print went for about 2 days, and then it had a gnarly little layer shift right here. And it happened during the night, or else I would have killed it a little bit quicker than I did. I was very frustrated whenever this happened because obviously whenever you have a print going for 2 days, this is about, you know, I want to say maybe $8 worth of material. So it's not really the material cost that got me. It was just more so the idea of, oh, I'm finally ready to work on this helmet, finally ready to dive back into this build, and then this happens. To add insult to injury, this is the last thing that I need to print for my husband, and I was just like ready for his stuff to be done. I had to get back to printing some Bo-Katan stuff, and I'm kind of on a little time crunch with all that stuff. So anyways, you don't care about that. So what happened with this helmet is I printed it at 112%, and this is actually way too big. Like whenever my husband put this like failed print on his head, it was such a bobblehead. And again, I didn't follow my own rules of, you know, doing a test print and things like that because I was just so determined to get this helmet done and out of the way. That's another thing. Don't, you know, let your frustration get you too much that you're not doing all of your due diligence in the beginning. Kind of glad that this failed, but also it still does frustrate me. So after I got all of my angries out and all my frustration out at this print failing again, I went back up to my slicer on my computer and I dialed back my millimeters per second from 100 to 70 millimeters per second. And then I also took the scale down from 112% to 105% scale. And thankfully, after 2.5-ish days, I have my own Mandalorian helmet. It looks exactly like the one that I was printing back in January. However, this one is the correct size and scale for my husband's head. And it is, I'm hoping it's going to be a lot smoother of a process to paint this. And I will be going over the paint process that I am going to be doing. I have decided that I'm going to be using airbrush paints because it's probably going to be a lot easier for me to not have runs in my paint, as well as I'll be able to seal it with an airbrush sealer too. I hope that this video was interesting in some way, just to kind of showcase the thought process of dealing with, you know, a lot of failures along the way of printing something. And I consider myself lucky because technically I only had one print failure in the 3 prints that I have printed out. First helmet that I printed, that failed completely because of my own doing, because I didn't do enough research and I didn't scale it correctly, and I also just, you know, painted like a mad woman. And the second helmet, that was like my only real failures. But I do just want to kind of bring it to light because it happens. These things do happen. And, you know, if you have to take a day or 2 off from not printing or just not even thinking about printing, that's totally fine and totally normal. I took 5 months off from working on this costume because I was so frustrated with myself getting to the phase of painting the helmet, and I screwed it up at that point. And I'm gonna have a lot more failures to cover in the weeks to come, especially with this Mandalorian armor build. I completely screwed up with a lot of my UV resin stuff and ended up making more work for myself. So you will have no shortage of me completely failing in the coming weeks, and hopefully they help you out in some way, or maybe you just enjoy watching someone else fail to make yourself feel better. That's totally fine. I can be that for you. I will be that person for you. I would love to hear your guys' failures down in the comments, so please leave them down there. It doesn't have to be a 3D printer fail. It can be something that you were working on a costume for and you decided after, you know, 2 weeks of working on your armor that you didn't like the shape of it, so you had to completely scrap it and throw it away. I did that with all of my Gamora armor. If any of you remember my Gamora tutorials at the beginning of this YouTube channel, oh my god, those are such bad videos. I threw all of my Gamora armor away because I just absolutely hated how it looked. These things happen, and I feel like it happens to myself more than it probably should. But hey, I will be that person to just talk about failure to you to make you feel better about yourself. Let's all just embrace the fact that this hobby is a lot of trial and error, and there's always gonna be failures along the way, and that's totally fine, but what matters is you pushing past those failures to get an awesome costume in the end. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye!